What if I told you the most important thing my mother ever gave me wasn't money, advice, or even time, but something everyone else believed had no value at all? The last thing my mother placed in my hands was small, light, easy to overlook, a carved wooden box worn smooth from years of being opened and closed. I was 16. She was already losing strength to cancer, but when she gave it to me, her voice didn't shake. "Keep this safe," she said. "One day you'll need it." I didn't ask why. When someone is running out of time, you don't question their certainty. You just promise. 3 years later, that same box was inside our living room fireplace, burning. My stepmother stood in front of it, smiling, as if she'd just thrown away clutter instead of a memory. She nudged the box deeper into the flames with a metal poker and laughed. "Honestly," she said, "it was just junk. This house needed a reset." I watched quietly. No yelling, no reaction. That part confused her. Normally, I defended anything tied to my mother, photos, furniture, even old habits. But this time, I just shrugged and agreed. Just stuff. What she didn't know was that I'd already opened the box months earlier, alone. Inside wasn't jewelry. It wasn't letters. It wasn't sentimental keepsakes. It was paperwork. Carefully folded documents my mother had hidden where no one thought to look. She hadn't been reminiscing. She'd been planning for something she never explained out loud. She'd been protecting me from decisions I wasn't old enough to fight yet. The box burning in that fireplace wasn't the real one. I had replaced it with a replica, hoping she'd take the bait. Not because I was confident, but because I was scared of what would happen if she ever touched the real contents. When she laughed at the fire, I knew 2 things for sure. First, she believed she'd erased the last trace of my mother. Second, she had no idea she'd just confirmed everything my mother warned me about. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started waiting. She thought burning that box erased my mother, but what she really did was activate a plan she didn't even know existed. I didn't wait long. The very next morning, before anyone else was awake, I left the house with only my backpack and my phone. No dramatic goodbye, no confrontation. Waiting didn't mean doing nothing. It meant moving quietly. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from a lawyer my mother had trusted for years. He didn't look surprised when I placed the folder on his desk. In fact, he nodded, like this was something he'd been expecting to see eventually. "These are originals," he said, flipping through the pages carefully. "And they're valid." That was the first confirmation that mattered. The documents weren't emotional. They weren't symbolic. They were structural, ownership records, trust instructions, clauses that only activated once I reached a certain age. My mother had anticipated delay, people stepping in before I could. "She built in timing," the lawyer explained. "Not confrontation. Protection." While I was there, my stepmother was doing something else entirely. She was confident, comfortable, making decisions like everything was already hers. I found out later that same afternoon, she'd called the bank, tried to update account access, and started asking about changing the house records. Not aggressively, casually, like someone who believed the system was already on her side. That's what made it dangerous, because when people move too early, they leave a trail. By the time I got home that evening, she was relaxed, almost pleased with herself. She talked about fresh starts and simplifying things, like the fire from the night before was just part of spring cleaning. I listened. I didn't correct her. Instead, I forwarded one email from the lawyer to a second address she didn't know existed. That email triggered a process, not an argument. Requests were logged. Documents were flagged. Timelines were locked. From that moment on, nothing could be handled quietly anymore. She thought she was securing her future, but what she didn't realize was that the moment she touched the system, it started recording everything. The first sign came sooner than I expected. Not a phone call, not an argument, a notification, a routine one, at least on the surface. A confirmation request from the bank. Verification language, neutral wording. The kind of message people ignore when they believe nothing is wrong. My stepmother didn't ignore it. She read it twice, then a third time. I could tell because she stood still in the kitchen longer than usual, phone in her hand, smile fading just slightly. "Probably a delay," she said out loud, more to herself than to me. "They've been slow lately." But delays don't usually ask questions. Over the next few days, more things stopped moving the way she expected them to. An account update that required additional review. A property inquiry that didn't get approved automatically. A polite email requesting clarification on authority. Nothing alarming, nothing accusatory, just friction. She started making calls, short ones at first. Friendly tone, familiar confidence. The voice of someone who believed the system would correct itself once she explained who she was. It didn't. Each call ended the same way. "We'll need to check that." That phrase changed everything. Because systems don't say that unless something is already flagged. I could see it settling in slowly, not panic, not fear. Confusion. The kind that comes when your assumptions stop lining up with reality. One evening, she asked me a question that sounded casual. "Did your mother ever handle paperwork?" she said. "Anything financial?" I shook my head. Not a lie. Not the truth, just enough space between the two. The next morning, an envelope arrived. Not addressed to her. To me, official, heavy paper, clean formatting. She watched me open it from across the room, pretending not to care. Inside was a notice, not a verdict, not a threat. A request to appear. And once something like that is scheduled, it doesn't cancel itself. She still thought she was fixing a delay, but the system had already moved past explanations and started calling people in. After the envelope arrived, the house changed. Not emotionally, structurally. Phones stayed on tables longer. Emails were reread before being answered. Conversations stopped ending mid-sentence, like someone was measuring every word before letting it leave their mouth. My stepmother tried to regain control the only way she knew how, by explaining. She made calls again. Longer ones this time, more careful, less confident. She repeated names, dates, titles, as if familiarity alone could restore access. It didn't. What she didn't understand was that the system had already moved past explanations. Once questions are formalized, answers don't speed things up, they just get logged. Another notice arrived 2 days later, then another. Each one neutral, polite, precise. None of them addressed to her. She started asking indirect questions, not accusations, just probes. "Do you know why they'd need this? Did your mother ever mention anything unusual? Have you heard of delays like this before?" I answered carefully. Not defensively, not helpfully. Enough to keep things moving, not enough to redirect them. The pressure didn't come all at once. It narrowed. Appointments replaced assumptions. Reviews replaced access. Temporary holds replaced authority. At one point, she laughed softly, almost convincingly. "This is just how these things go," she said. "Once they sort it out, everything will be fine." But systems don't sort things out for people who don't have standing. By the end of the week, a meeting was scheduled. Time, location, required attendance. No option to postpone. She read the notice silently, then folded it neatly and placed it on the counter like it might disappear if handled gently. It didn't, because by then, there was nothing left to smooth over. She still believed this was a misunderstanding, but the system had already decided it was time to stop listening and start confirming. The meeting didn't feel dramatic. No raised voices, no accusations, no final speeches. It felt administrative, a long table, neutral walls, folders placed carefully in front of the right people. Everyone addressed by title, not by name. The kind of setting where emotions don't carry weight, but documentation does. My stepmother spoke first. She explained again. She clarified timelines, repeated intentions, pointed to misunderstandings she believed could still be corrected if everyone slowed down long enough to listen. They listened. Then they asked questions she couldn't answer without referencing things she no longer had access to. That was the moment the tone shifted, not outwardly but definitively. Because once answers require authorization, confidence stops mattering. What followed wasn't a confrontation. It was confirmation. Dates aligned. Records matched. Authority was traced back, not to the loudest voice in the room, but to the earliest signatures. The kind written before assumptions replaced structure. No one looked at me for a reaction. That's how I knew it was over. When the meeting ended, there was no announcement. No verdict read aloud, just a summary sent afterward. Clear language, clean formatting, final instructions, access revoked, roles corrected. control restored to where it had always legally belonged. She left before I did. Not rushed, not stopped, just finished. Later that evening, I sat alone and reread the original documents my mother had hidden years ago. Not for reassurance, but because I finally understood what she'd done. She hadn't set a trap, she'd set a timeline. And she trusted that when the moment came, I'd let the system do exactly what it was designed to do. She thought burning that box would erase my mother, but all it really did was reveal who never had permission in the first place.